Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid. This is my E46. This is part 2 of my cooling system series. In the previous video, we changed out the radiator and the expansion tank. And in this video, I'm going to proceed to change out the hoses, the thermostat, and the water pump. I really encourage you to do all of that in one whole job because I'm going to have to drain the coolant again, especially including the coolant from the block, which was a real pain in the ass last time. It became really messy. I actually have a plan to hopefully make it a little less messy this time, which involves aluminum foil. Hopefully that'll work. One thing I want to mention is that I did reuse my hoses in the last video, and it turned out this hose was kind of bad. Look at this. That's not good, right? This one leaked pretty bad after I reused it. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, so this thing leaked really bad, and what happened was my hoses finally came in, because I still had them on order. That's the reason I didn't change them in the video. They came in a couple days, and I just changed out the top hose. And what happened with that is that one then leaked. It kind of leaked from the O-ring right around here. And I had purchased what were advertised as Rhine brand hoses from a seller on eBay. The ones that showed up looked like this. They looked like this with the proper, fused on metal bands and stuff, as opposed to, some aftermarket ones just have sort of a ring clamp thing around here type of thing. So they looked the part, but they definitely weren't OEM Rhine hoses that have this Rhine packaging and this Rhine Automotive Group stamp on them. Instead, they had a stamp on them that said made in Turkey. So yeah, I returned those, and I picked up, well, I didn't get all Rhine hoses from my local parts house. This is the lower hose right here. I got what they told me was an OE European manufacturer that's good quality, and so far it has not leaked. So anyway, that is the one that's on the car now, so I won't be replacing that one, but I'll just, as part of this video, you'll see how to get it off and put it back on. And then also other things to talk about. Your thermostat, you want to get a Waller brand thermostat. This is the OEM one, and I highly recommend you go for this one. It's about 50 bucks. I had previously, when I first bought the car, I replaced the existing thermostat with an aftermarket one that I think was made in India. That was a big mistake because this thermostat actually has a heating element inside of it, an electric heating element. It's not a thermostat. This is a thermostat housing. This is a thermostat, but this is not an electric thermostat for it to tell the temperature. This is a heating element so that it can artificially open the actual thermostat and cool the car down a couple of degrees before the car needs to be. So that's how the engine computer can finally control the temperature on an E46. And what happens is on an aftermarket thermostat, that element won't react properly, and it'll actually cause a code. I forget what the code is. It's like a 2 something code, it's like a BMW specialty code. I forget what it is, but it's something about like cooling map. It'll say something like cooling map. So if you get that and you used an aftermarket thermostat housing, that's what it is. You got to use a Waller so that you don't get any codes. What else? I'm going to be using a Miley water pump, which is not the OEM, but this is a good brand of manufacturer of parts. If at all possible, I like to go with Miley or Waller or Bear when it comes to parts on an E46 if I can, particularly if they have electronics in them. This is just a water pump, it's just bearings, which are probably still made in China anyway, but I like to go with a good brand of water pump. This one has the metal impeller. I don't know if you know, but the OEM ones came with plastic impellers, and there were problems where those impellers would crumble or shatter and your water pump would die at that point. So people have been switching to metal water pumps with metal impellers. Anyway, enough talking. Let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we got to drain the radiator. For me, on this new Bear radiator, it's a 22. I got to undo this bolt. It doesn't have one of those little screws in the center of this thing. Make sure you pull off the bleed screw when you're doing that, and the radiator cap, but especially the bleed screw. That allows a lot more coolant to come out. Okay guys, I've got some heavy duty aluminum foil that I've done like 2 layers of, and I've made sort of a funnel, and I've just sort of molded it to the shape of, you know, everything that the coolant's gonna flow over. Hopefully this is gonna contain the mess. Okay, here we go. Hopefully this works. Not at all. Okay. So I've removed a few things to start off with. Obviously the air scoop, the fan in the fan shroud, the air filter box over here. If you don't know how to do that, take a look at my common repair steps video. I typically never do these things because I just, you know, I've done them in that common repair steps video, so I just refer back to that. So refer to that if you need to know how to get to this point. Now we're going to start by taking off this upper hose. There's another little clip back here that you got to pull up. 2 clips there, 1 clip here. So it's nice to find it difficult to remove this hose. It makes you, lets you know that it's going to be staying on here well enough. There we go. So yeah, this was my replacement hose already, so I'm going to be reusing that. So that lower hose is kind of the same. It's got 2 clips on it. We're just going to do the top here first. So there's that. Okay, so here's the lower part of the hose. You see there's a sensor here. That's a temperature sensor. And it's also got a clip, which we got to pull up on. And it is going to be difficult to remove. If you've never had it off, it's going to be very, very difficult to remove. I recommend a little pry bar, just to kind of help you get some prying action against it. Sometimes it can be hard to dig in on it. You can so there we go. You can use the end of the radiator right here, this kind of crimped edge. Don't pry on it too hard though. You don't want to mess that edge up. In fact, I probably shouldn't pry against that, and I shouldn't recommend prying against that, so be very careful, because that right there, this crimp is where the plastic tanks on the side of your radiator are joined to the radiator, and you know, if you cause damage to that, it will definitely leak. So you should be able to tell that this is an aftermarket hose. You see it's got this sort of crimped on band as opposed to the sort of, I don't know, this continuous band that runs all the way around on the OEM style ones. Not just because you see this kind of band though doesn't mean that it's an OEM hose, because this is not from the BMW dealer. So one thing I want to point out about the lower hose, you've got this coolant temperature sensor right here, and this O-ring, you are going to have to change this O-ring. It will leak if you do not change this. So this is the part number right here, hopefully. So that's the O-ring part number right there. So yeah, definitely have to change this or it will leak, guaranteed, even if you use RTV. Okay, we're going to pull off the thermostat housing now. There's that connector for that heating element, and we're going to need to get off this the engine lifting bracket because it shares a bolt with the top bolt on the thermostat housing. So that one on the front there, I believe, is actually an 11. And then behind it is a 13. So that should be enough to get it loose, and we'll be able to maneuver the thermostat housing down and out from beneath it. So the rest of these should be 10s. One there, and there should be, I believe, either 1 or 2. Yeah, there are 2 more below. Now we can just pull it off. There we go. Old one. And you can see that there's some gray RTV around my O-ring here. That's actually key. A lot of it got left on the block, so I'm gonna have to clean that off. That's key to not having it leak. Even these OEM replacements, for some reason, just want to leak. I don't know what it is, but I find that putting some RTV on there is just extra added insurance to not have to do this again. So we're definitely going to be doing that. But first we got to clean the old stuff off. But before I get to the RTV and everything, I'm gonna do the water pump. I'm gonna get this harness just out of the way for you guys. I had previously removed both the belts just to get them out of the way, and I forgot that you actually need to leave the belt installed in order to get these bolts off of the water pump so you can get the water pump pulley off. So you leave that belt on so you just have some tension to pull against. Otherwise the thing would just spin around. This thing's really fast. I like it. It doesn't have the most torque in the world. So it just tells you when it can't get a bolt off, and at that point you just gotta use it like a normal ratchet to break something loose, and then you can spin something off really fast. So I really like it. Milwaukee. What is it? It's the 3/8 inch ratchet. It's the 2457-20, if anybody's interested. So now I'm gonna pull that belt off. Oh, bingo. Bullseye. Okay, so now we can pull off the water pump. Just 4 nuts. So now what you want to do is take 2 of the bolts from the thermostat housing, just the 10mm ones, and the ones with the 10mm heads, I should say, and just thread those in to the sides of the water pump right here, and we're going to use those to press the water pump off the engine block. Kind of nifty. Oop, 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 wrong way. Kind of get out of the way for you. You just do a little at a time. Okay. I honestly didn't expect that much coolant to come out after the block was drained, but there you go. Honestly, I'm wondering if that block draining was even worth it. I have my pan underneath here now. I'm wondering if that block draining was even worth it, because I could have just done this right here. I didn't really need to drain the block like that and make such a mess, because this made a mess too. So I would encourage you to consider that when you do this job. You could actually, if you're doing all this stuff together, you could just start with removing these components off the engine, and if you're going to change your radiator and stuff, then you can pull the radiator off, because at that point all the coolant's kind of out of the engine. Okay, I'm going to clean off the RTV now. Just using a plastic scraper here just to get most of it off. So I really want to get this bracket out of here. It's just going to make things that much easier, especially to clean this up. So I'm going to pull off this oil line for the Vanos right here. This is just totally optional. You don't have to do this, but I'm choosing to do it. Okay, the washer wants to stay on there, so I'm just going to leave it on there. So now we can get that off. Nice. So to clean the surface up, I'm going to use an angle die grinder with this little roll-lock disc on it. So Yeah, that Rolock disc actually does a pretty good job. It might even be a little too soft on the aluminum because it was just taking quite a while to get everything off. I think I might bump up to a disc with a finer or a rougher grit on it for next time. But yeah, that's a really, you know, easy way to clean things up. You don't have to have that power tool to do this though. You can just use a Scotch-Brite pad or a steel wool is even good too. So before we put everything back together, I just want to change this hose. This is the lower hose that actually goes to the block. It's down right here, down back there, and it connects to not the coolant reservoir, but beneath it, connects to just that little part that goes into the lower half of the radiator. I think this is probably what provides coolant directly to the automatic transmission cooler. Not sure, could be wrong. But this comes from the block, and I wanted to change this because the end of it that plugged into the radiator down there was kind of getting a little gnarly, looking like it was starting to leak. So I'm going to change this, but not looking forward to it. So if we remember from last time, this little duct has to come off, and it just kind of pulls out of the front of this top one, at least it should. Yeah, there we go. So this is the hose that we're going to be getting off, and I'm sorry I'm not going to give you a close-up of this because last time I did this the camera got really wet, and it was a pain, and I just don't want to go through that again. So you guys are going to have to be way far away for this. Okay, finally got the little ring up. Yeah, this is definitely going to leak, so unfortunately nothing I can do about it. I remember I had to do this from above last time after the coolant reservoir was out, and it was particularly difficult. Okay, we need a tool of some kind. Okay, I want zero mess on this one. So I'm just gonna wait for it to drain like that. That makes me happy. So far, very little mess. So unfortunately, there's just no way I can get a good shot of this without blocking it. So I apologize. The ring is on the far side. It's on this side, not the top, not the left side, not the bottom, but on the right side. Hopefully I can just pull that sucker off. Yeah, very nice. I think I'm going to pull the rest of the duct off of the alternator here, if I can. Oh, it's so slippery. Yeah, there we go. And right in the coolant, of course. So I should be able to just pull this hose out from the top here. Okay, that's from the radiator. No big deal. So this is how it went in. It had this little, has this little zip tie thing on it, which probably connected to something, but long ago came out of that something. So I'm just gonna replace this thing. Let's match up our new part. Looks like it goes in this way. Aw, look what I just saw on the part. Made in Turkey. This thing better not let me down. That's all I gotta say. Anyway, let's take a look at that old part. So you can see how it was going all gnarly. See, the rubber was getting real squishy up here, and yeah, that just doesn't look healthy. That looked like it was on the verge of leaking, so time to change that one. All right, let's get the new one in. Remember to tug on your connections real good. Make sure they're on there. Do that above here. Okay. I'm going to try to put this alternator duct back in somehow. Probably be able to get that top half in easier from above. Yeah, it's mostly in anyway. There. Cool. So let's put our new water pump in. It only goes in one way. So like for instance, if I try to put it in upside down, it wouldn't align properly. So right there. And you know, I think what I want to do, you don't have to do this, but I think I'm going to put some silicone paste right around that O-ring to just help it slip on easier. I suppose you can use oil or something, but petroleum oils will eat O-rings. So it's just better to use silicone paste because that won't damage any O-rings. You can also use coolant, I believe. So you just want to get it in there, wiggle it in, get it seated. That just makes it so much easier, you know? You don't want to be forcing that O-ring in, it could tear. Nice new water pump and nice dirty fasteners. So the torque on these is 89 inch-pounds, 7.5 foot-pounds. Looks like I'm already there. You know, it's not very much, it's just hand tight. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do to get this thermostat housing not to leak. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on with the bolts, and I'm gonna torque it down to spec. And then I'm gonna pull it back off again and put RTV around it. So by putting it on, I'm just sort of compressing the O-ring where it wants to be. Just want to make sure to get these started first. So it's again 7.5 foot-pounds, 89 inch-pounds. It's not very much. I'm just doing that to kind of seat the O-ring, get it where it wants to be. And I'm going to pull it off and put RTV around it. So you can see that this O-ring is still pretty much intact. It retained its shape. It's kind of pointed. It's sticking out quite a bit. I haven't seen an O-ring like this. The other ones have just been normal sort of rounded O-rings that have compressed a little too much. Maybe I'm just used to seeing the aftermarket part, or maybe that's what that's what I did the first time, and that's what I had problems with the first time. So maybe I wouldn't have problems with this, but I'm still gonna do this just because I don't want to have problems. I've been through this one too many times. Just, you know, I just don't want to have problems. There, just give it a nice little surrounding bead. I'm contemplating whether or not to put a bead in here. I might do it. Why not? Just 'cause. So you'll want to have one of the bolts handy. A lot easier to do this and get it back on without that hook in the way. So just before you squish it on there, just get a bolt or two started. In fact, I want to get one of the lower ones started so I know it's aligned. Okay, so now we can just sort of squish it on. Let's get our other bolts started. Now, ideally, you want to follow the directions on the package of gray RTV. And by the way, use gray RTV for this. I recommend gray. You want to tighten it just until you see the RTV squish out. Just until you see that happening. And then leave it to dry for an hour. Then torque it to specs. Those are the directions on the RTV. I suggest you follow those. Because I have this particular O-ring and I think it's going to be a little better, I'll just go ahead and torque it to spec, because the torque specs really are not that big a deal. In fact, you probably don't even need to wait, just because it's 89 inch-pounds. You know, if it's something else, see that, like, that didn't even move really. I mean, 89 inch-pounds is just, it's not enough in my opinion. I'm almost contemplating going a little bit more, but it's a good idea to follow specs. And that's it. Let's get our engine hook back on. Oh, look at that. Look what I forgot to do. Typical for me. Got to put my hook back on. This is the old thermostat. You can see that it is a Waller. Hopefully you can see Waller. And take a look at the old O-ring. See how flat it is? It doesn't have that little pointed, it's not, you know, gray colored for one thing, and it's just sort of flattened out over time. This is why I did that with the RTV. So I guess it depends on your O-ring. I have better hopes for, maybe they have an improved O-ring or something like that. But if you've got this one that's just a normal type of O-ring, you can see how it just really flattens out over time, and it definitely leaks. So now we can get our water pump pulley back on there. These bolts are sort of offset to each other, so it only goes on in two directions. It wouldn't go on up or down, only right to left. So you just gotta spy the right alignment before you start. Just get your bolts hand tight. We'll tighten them after we put the belt back on. I'm using a metal pulley, by the way. The OEM one is plastic. You can buy a metal one on eBay or elsewhere, I suppose. I don't really know that that's necessary, but you know, they got me with metal versus plastic. I suppose they use plastic on the, you know, the BMW uses plastic just to keep things lighter. So I've got the belt back on, and these bolts here are same as everything else, 7.5. Now is the time to put this harness back. Does it run over there or does it run behind the cap? I've never been sure. Anybody know? Probably runs behind there. Probably right there, right? Probably not. But I'm just going to do it there. So that right there is the exhaust camshaft position sensor. And this connector is for the exhaust Vanos camshaft solenoid. And this actually gets tucked back behind the housing right here so that it's up and out of the way. So like that. So I've got my new Rhine hose, transferred over the coolant temperature sensor with a new O-ring. We'll just snap that thing back in. Remember to give it a tug. Make sure that it's on there correctly. Aww. These quick connect hoses are so stupid. They're just, you know, I think BMW meant to make it easier on people, but it's just 1,000 times harder because it's just more things that can fail. They have O-rings in them. They go over plastic housings. It's plastic on plastic with an O-ring. They get frozen in place. And what's worse, you saw how they leak. This thing, you know, the hose gets stretchy after a while, and this thing, it leaks from in here, and it, you can just spin the housing around like you saw earlier, and you can't tighten these clamps down. So I don't know, man. Give me just a rubber hose with a ring clamp and a metal, you know, a metal housing to clamp it over any day. That was just superior technology all the way. We had it right like 60 years ago. Maybe 100 years ago. That's probably what the first cars had. Just make sure you're all the way on that one. These are just a pain in the butt. Make sure you're all the way on it. Snap that back down. So that's the radiator one. Make sure you push the reservoir, the coolant reservoir, up forward into the hose before you snap that lock down. Give it a test by tugging it backwards. That's all good. So don't forget to plug that coolant temperature sensor back in. I'm going to put the rest of the car back together and refill it full coolant. So I just finished getting all the coolant added back to the system and getting it bled. Wasn't too hard. And, you know, this is a pretty straightforward kind of job. You don't really need any specialty tools to do it. Really, anybody can do this. Hey, if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing. I got a lot of great videos yet to come. I'm the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching.